Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to Mystery Fix, where we talk about writing mysteries and all the details. So today I want to talk about clues and foreshadowing. First, let's take a look at what foreshadowing is. It's a literary device which is like an advance hint of something that will happen later in the story. So in most of fiction, foreshadowing creates an atmosphere of suspense. And as the reader continues on with expectations over later events. But for mystery writers, it's a little bit different. So you can foreshadow upcoming events with dialogue and plot events and even changes in settings, and each method supplies a way to hint to the reader of what is coming, and each instance builds suspense for the reader who wants to know how that dialogue, event, or setting change will lead toward the discovery of the killer. And the best way for mystery writers to create foreshadowing is with the clues, but each clue your sleuth discovers in a mystery foreshadows that final revelation. By the end of the story, we're going to know who that killer was. But the mystery writer has a challenge, and that's how to plant clues without giving away the villain before the end. So you want to foreshadow without foreshadowing. That's kind of how I look at it. In the mystery novel, you want to tantalize your reader without calling emphasis to the clues that point toward the final discovery. And the device works like a secret foreshadowing to keep your reader guessing. So let's look at a few ways you can do this foreshadowing, because mystery readers, as much as they want to learn who the killer is, they're going to be disappointed in your story if they guess before the sleuth reveals the killer. So it's a real trick to plant those clues in your story by making them visible, and the reader reads them, and they skim over it because there are various ways to hide those clues without giving away the secret of who the villain is. You're going to need a super attentive reader to, if you do this well, to guess who the villain is before the end of your story. So I'm going to walk through about 10 ways you can do this. One is what I call sequence diversion. So you put the real clue right before a false one. And readers in your sleuth often focus on that last clue presented. This especially has to do with how this comes up in dialogue, or what the sleuth sees as he looks around a room or a setting. So if you're getting started with mystery writing, this tactic is a great place to start. You can mention or show the clue first, and then immediately focus on a different clue or a red herring. So you drop it in there, but you just shift the focus right away to something else. And then there's what I call secret emphasis, and that's emphasizing the unimportant and de-emphasizing the clue. So the reader sees the clue but doesn't see what's important about it. And for example, your sleuth may see the value of a company report and the statistical details, but doesn't look at the man who researched and wrote the report. So it's like you put it there, but the emphasis is in the wrong place. And in that example, it's the emphasis is on the report, but your sleuth doesn't really look at who created the report. And another way to plant your clue is what I call before it counts. So early on in your story, plant the clue before it has any real context in the story. So your sleuth may walk by a man cleaning his yacht with chemicals before a business partner dies of toxic chemical poisoning. And Carolyn Graham in the Inspector Barnaby series uses this a lot in her story. So, you see somebody doing something and it doesn't seem to have any context in what's going on at the current moment, but has a really important significance later on in the story. And then there's what I call missed it. You just missed it. Your sleuth misinterprets the meaning of a clue, and the murder took place in a room with open windows, and your detective believes that's how the murderer escaped. But the windows were open to let in the evening breeze, and the murderer escaped through the door and out the back staircase. And this is a great tool to use with a flawed sleuth whose flaw keeps her from seeing the real meaning. You get to play with this a lot as you develop your sleuth and how they proceed in solving the crime. Then there's what I call the not a clue. And this is the clue that isn't there. And although your sleuth may deduce certain actions happened, the real clue is absent. And the classic clue that isn't there is when Sherlock Holmes realizes the dog didn't bark in Silver Blaze and there was no intruder. So that's the not a clue, that's a clue. That's the thing that isn't there. Another way to plant your clues is what I call piece by piece. And it's kind of a time release method to scatter pieces of clues in different places throughout the story. And you can mix up the logical order, and your sleuth finds an empty aquarium, water but no fish in the suspect's room, and later she finds 6 fish bodies tossed out a window, and she has an epiphany when she remembers the empty aquarium. So you place those clues at different spots in your story. And then there's hiding a clue in plain sight. So you create a cluster of clues that your sleuth is looking around, looking at all these things. And this is often something that happens when they have their reflective moment and they're making a list of things. And there's a cluster of clues, and you squeeze the real clue in with a lot of others. So you're hiding it in plain sight, and your detective may overlook this clue because there's so many others and they seem at the time much more important. And this technique works really well in a story with multiple suspects, like Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, to anything by John D. MacDonald. They both use this technique a lot. Hiding the clue in plain sight. There it is. If I just thought about it when I read it, says your reader, I should have known right then that that was a clue. So that's one way you can do it. All right, and another way is distraction. So you draw your reader's attention away from the clue. You mention it, and the sleuth and the reader follow a false trail. They go off somewhere else, and what seems like the most evident clues are not the real trail to the suspect. And Adrian McKenty does this in The Cold Ground, where the clues seem to lead toward a serial killer who targets homosexuals, and it's not the case at all. It's something very, very different. He does a really good job with that in The Cold Ground. I actually recommend reading that book to everyone. who's interested in mysteries. It's just very, very well done. All right, and then they have what I call the time seed, and you create a time problem. A suspect has an alibi for the time of the murder, and later it turns out that the murder was earlier and the alibi doesn't work anymore, or the suspect claims the time as an alibi but could get away during the time covered by the alibi. And so you get to play with the time sequence or what's perceived or what your sleuth hears is the right time frame, which isn't the right time frame. Okay, and then another way is to camouflage your clue with action. So just as your sleuth glances at a scrap of paper on the floor, he's hit from behind. Or and in the ensuing an action and consequences, a trip to the hospital, a missed appointment because of the time in the hospital, etc., your sleuth just overlooks the clue. It's just your sleuth forgets about it, overlooks it, and it was there all the time, but other events like some kind of action scene take your sleuth's attention away from that clue. And Joe Nesbo uses action camouflage a lot in his Harry Hole series. There's another good series to read are the Harry Hole series, and just a really good mystery writer. Okay, so foreshadowing with clues is a challenge for mystery writers. You really kind of have to get those clues in place, and it doesn't matter if you're a planner or a pantser. Pantsers often go back and plant those clues in different ways when they finally figure out, what the ending is. And planners can do that as they go through the story. Either way, you want to make sure that your clues are foreshadowing that big conclusion, the great reveal when the sleuth says, this is the person who did it. But you want your readers to be guessing the whole way through, and keep those foreshadowing moments in mind. So the mystery writer needs to subdue the foreshadowing by hiding the clues. And at the end, your reader may realize all the clues were there, but while reading, you want to keep those clues hidden. Okay, I hope that helps. And as always, I love to hear from you about your mystery writing and what you're struggling with and what works for you. And so please drop me a line or leave some comments below the video, and I will see you next time.